The rise of artificial intelligence is no longer a distant future. It's our today's reality, reshaping industries, economies, and the way we work and live. Strategic thinking around AI is now more critical than ever. And in today's podcast, we will deep dive into how having a clear AI roadmap has become not just an advantage, but a necessity. To answer our questions today, we have with us Adam Elshimi, CEO and co-founder of Sense AI, and a leading expert in artificial intelligence, data science, and machine learning. With over 14 years of experience, Adam has helped redefine enterprise transformation through the intelligent use of AI technologies. His expertise spans the development of predictive models, scalable AI ML architectures, and multi-agent systems, with hands-on experience across platforms like TensorFlow, PyTorch, and major cloud environments. Throughout his career, Adam has guided organizations across sectors including telecom, technology, retail, and finance, driving innovation, operational efficiency, and strategic growth. As a passionate advocate for agentic automation and generative AI, Adam continues to lead cutting-edge initiatives that position AI at the heart of business success. Let's welcome Adam Elshimi. Thank you very much, Adam, for joining us today for this podcast, where we'll be discussing the roadmap, the real cost of not having an AI roadmap. So, Adam, I'd like you to first start off with your introduction, your experiences with as an AI expert, how you've been helping companies, and just a little bit about your startup.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so a brief background about me. I've been a mathematician by trade for many years. I studied that at King's College London many years ago. Um, Along the way, we've done a lot of startups. So my experience in business has spanned across the 10-year period, where I have started several startups. Some have failed, some have successfully been obviously sold. And so along the way, I did decide to use my mathematics to attend to more important questions that I felt like was more pertinent for us, and which AI started to deliver, especially in the data science field. And so I done a master's in data science, and then quickly started to work in the AI field in different industries. So I have an experience as a senior AI engineer for many years. Recently was in a telecommunication company for a multinational, where I got a lot of the experience and insights to how traditional legacy kind of business workflow meets the new modern and future AI kind of workflow. And so that was a great experience for me. But then when I left that, there seemed to be still something nagging. And so I started a company called Sensei with my co-founder, Matthew Fernandez, who's also based in France. And we joined together to build a Sensei company around multi-agent systems. And so what we have been focusing on over the last 7 to 8 months specifically is how do we get businesses ready for the kind of AI revolution in some sense. Because we find that a lot of companies are suffering from not understanding what exactly is AI, how do we implement it. There are so many parts for us to actually navigate before you can get it implemented into your system. And so there's been a very difficult process there. And one thing that we found that was very useful was AI auditing. How do we give a roadmap and insight and understand where they stand in terms of their infrastructure and the resources and the employees, which is a very holistic approach to understanding how to implement AI. And that has been very useful. And so we found that that saves a lot of money, a lot of time. And of course, um, most implementations that people know, like any models that are created, most of them don't see a light of day. Most of them don't actually get implemented, and they waste a lot of money and time. So I think that was the most important part of the building blocks before we start to talk about AI and implementation and how you can utilize it, was how do we actually make it transparent for you, and how do you get to understand how that benefits your company?
Thank you, Adam. From what you've just said, I'd like to ask you my very first question. Um, what we've seen is that a lot of companies talk about transformation, AI implementation. Would you like to shed some light on why strategic thinking around AI is becoming more and more urgent now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one place I like to start with this is to give a kind of a brief context. I think it's really good to understand it within the wider context of where we stand in terms of AI, and the kind of industrial revolution 4.0 that we're currently under or we're currently in. Um, so think about the four different industrial revolutions. I mean, at the beginning, around the 1760s to the 1840s, and we had the first industrial revolution. And that obviously brought in the steam engine, it brought in the textile machinery, the iron works, etc. And that completely revolutionized the way we dealt with work in business and how we should think about obviously employees and how we work in this current economy. And then you got the second industrial revolution. And that obviously brought in the electricity and internal combustion engine, the steel, and that changed us to a mass production factory, obviously a mass production industry. This is where you got a lot of the global supply chains and a lot of the modern company infrastructure. And the reason why we have to think about this in terms of evolution is because at each stage, you have a very different business workflow and very different incentive structures. So when we got into the third industrial revolution, which is much more important to consider when we're talking about the current AI age, is we've got the digital computers and we've got the internet and the web, and with the semiconductors being started to be built and shipped, and we've got the information age and the information economy, which created knowledge workers. And over the last few years, we've globalized and we've had this kind of 24/7 connectivity. And this meant that we have an abundance of information. Those abundance of information at the beginning seemed to be very useful for us. It was something very new and we could actually utilize. But now going into AI, how does this relate? Well, now we've got obviously artificial intelligence and we had the biotechnology and blockchain, etc. When we think about AI now in this age, we're thinking about how do we best utilize and actually overcome the problems that we were met with the digital age, which was over too much information, right? And so when we're thinking about this strategically, we're thinking about how do we utilize our resources as best as we can to be able to tackle the problems that we have been left with from the prior years. And that's what we are finding a lot of companies are dealing with. Oh, okay, I have all of these data. I have all of this information. What do I do with it? What does this mean for me? And so that's where we start. And I think it's very important for us to understand the data side is very important. And so strategically, we would have to think about what do you want to achieve and how do we start to implement in terms of especially the data side, what it should look like so that you can actually build the AI capabilities and models you want. And so I think last, maybe another thing I could add there um, would be in an AI age, we experience a very different speed at which things are growing, right? We have exponential growth, and AI is definitely advancing in exponential ways. And so that means that everything needs to be based on speed. So how do we then strategize to make sure that we can adapt to the changes that are coming to us? And especially when you have so much information, your problem is not information no more. It's not about how do I do things, it's how quick can I do it. And so we've moved from an information kind of competition into a cognitive competition. How fast can I make decisions? Right. So and I think that's essential when we're thinking about the strategies of AI, especially in our current climate. And I think I would wrap up with the following, just to bring it home together, because I think it's important to think about this, is that traditional models of decision making was information, you make a decision, and then you have an action. And this could span days or weeks, right? Sometimes months. But now our cycle is shortened, it's compressed. And so we need speed for that decision making and intelligence. And so when we think about strategy, we need to take into consideration all these factors. But a good starting point would always be, do I have the right data infrastructure and do I have the right foundations to build on?
Thank you, Adam, for discussing the importance of strategic thinking around AI and why it is beneficial for companies to start thinking about implementing it for now. Uh, I want to ask you that, a common perception around it is that it's high cost. So how do you suggest small companies, and maybe startups to approach transformation by AI implementation, where we have, they have limited resources, and that, that might become secondary at times when they know that they are, providing their services or producing their goods at the available cost, available budget that they have. How do you suggest them to approach, implementation of AI?
Right. I mean, that's a good question. I would say, well, there's several things. One very obvious one, I can go through a whole list, but I pick only two or three to focus on, which I think is more pertinent during our current kind of economy and problems that companies are facing. Is always start with a problem, right? The reason why I say that is because we've spoken to many companies, and I've seen it myself personally as an engineer. People are kind of trying to take AI and smash everything with it, and you just want, and that's not useful because it wastes a lot of time and money. There is no efficiency there. Um, and and that and remember what we said prior, that information is abundant. So if you're going to take AI without a good filter because you don't know exactly where to apply it, you have a sea of possibilities and you're drowning in it. You're never going to be able to pick up and start, and you will be wasting a lot of money and time. So start with the problem. Start with a good problem, and then, oh, maybe something internal. I have a problem. I want to be able to solve this. Let's slowly break this apart and use AI maybe to enhance our process or create some automation along the way, and that could alleviate some of your initial problems for starting. Another one would be definitely use ready-made tools. Use ready-made tools. I mean, one of the big things that's happening is a lot of the models that we're seeing are open sourced, and a lot of the culture and technology and AI generally is moving towards an open source world where everyone does have access. One good model to think about this is, and this comes from one of the thinkers that I really like to follow, and an entrepreneur, Naval Ravikant, where he talks about permissionable, permissionless technology and permission led technology, right? And so we're currently at the permissionless technology stage, which is you don't need a permission or a some sort of barrier or entrance. You can pick up and use things. So use that to your advantage. And I would say definitely use off the shelf models, but be intelligent on how do you use that and enhance it with maybe a RAG system or maybe some fine tuning, which is not as demanding as obviously model training completely. And so I would say definitely use some ready-made tools off the shelf, and that would really help. The last thing I would add, and I think it's important to keep in mind, because I also found this to be a very common problem, is you have to bring a vision and upskill your team, because when the teams are not aligned, it's very difficult to actually get these kind of technologies in place. Because remember, this technology, it's not just implementing AI as a physical thing, it's a psychological thing as well. You have to bring the team members ready for that type of technology so you can have every single individual autonomous, being able to use and adapt and actually integrate AI into the business workflow. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
And we have talked about process flows. So one way of dealing with process flows is, use all these tools that are readily available in the market. And you've mentioned, the companies can resort to such, options if they don't have enough budget. Um, so in that case, what I've seen is that, companies at times implement too many tools, use too many tools, and those and for staff, for employees, at times it becomes really hard to concentrate on their work when they have too many tools to deal with. you know so how would you suggest, handling, or going to buy any tool or implement any tool, how the companies should approach, such a such an option?
Yeah, of course. Again, so being problem driven will always help with this. I'm just going to give that as a caveat. It really helps filter out what tools you actually need as opposed to just testing everything and, getting really excited and picking up a tool and smashing things with it. So I would say definitely start with that in mind. Um, so another thing I would say is this is where AI can be really helpful. So one of the problems you're pointing to here is the tools, and we can easily draw on a very popular um, kind of model that is used within the last 10 to 15 years, which is SaaS models, right? These are, again, particular tools that people are using. And what are SaaS models? Well, SaaS models was only a way of scaling applications. They codify business workflows and they give you a very standardized way of being able to navigate very complex business processes. Okay, great. So what happened after? Well, what happened after was that you had such big companies and so many different tasks and different business units within a company. You started to just adopt so many different new tools and platforms. So there's two things here we can talk about. One is, how does AI help with that? Well, think about AI as a wrapper. If I have, for example, Asana, and I have Salesforce, and I have MailChimp, all of these are different tools. And I can name you a lot more that a company would need. Now, this is too many, right? One thing you could do is wrap around that an agentic workflow, which would look like that instead of me having to drag myself to each platform and each tool to utilize it, I am now communicating with an agent that at the back is able to retrieve all the information I require. So instead of going to each platform, clicking a lot of different options, going through each platform when necessary, now I can just use natural language and interface with the agent so I can provide me with all the type of data that I need. And so that's one way to think about it. Maybe you can create an AI layer where you can actually communicate with these different tools. Another thing would be is that sometimes because of AI, with a lot of different abilities, like maybe tools like Replit and maybe tools like 3.0, which replaces things like Figma, these tools are great because they're generating for you code. And the fundamental thing that we're using to build tools and to build software is code. So that means you have an agent, a co-pilot, an assistant, if you will, that can actually assist you to build small tools for your team. So there are many ways we can take this to really help not try to not getting overburdened with so much tools and the costs that come with it, and maybe find creative ways by using AI to be able to adapt to this type of change.
So my question is, there's an increasing conversation around that SaaS is going to be replaced by AI agent. So I want to understand how long do you think that it will take for AI agent to replace SaaS? And I mean, in what terms does it add value? Uh, or how what terms it is better than SaaS?
Yeah, okay. So good question. I mean, I think this is a common question now, right? It's one of those things that stick out very quickly. I would say that number one, I wouldn't see it as replacing SaaS. Um, that would be a far-fetched thing at the moment. I think it's enhancing a lot of the SaaS approach to building platforms. Um, let's say, for example, so like we said, SaaS was basically scaling applications, but AI focuses on scaling the outcomes. And if we're going to be able to predict or foresee what's going to happen with the SaaS, all we need to see is what is actually currently happening with many of the platforms that we are actually using. And what we're finding is most of them are just adding a layer of agentic AI on top that allows them to do a lot more than they could before. And it also is able to lower a lot of the costs that was once incurred by a SaaS platform. So there are several things that we should consider. One is AI will have a will affect kind of workflows, right? And so workflow breakage will be a very common thing, which means that, for example, the example that I used before, rather than using multiple platforms, you're now going to be using one agent, right? But then this also affects cost structures. How does this affect cost structures? Well, the the cost of intelligence at the disposal of any person is now is going to zero, which means that building SaaS products is much cheaper, but also customers expect SaaS products to be a bit cheaper. And so when you have OpenAI and ChatGPT, for instance, that give you the access to their platform for £20 or $20 or $30 a month, it's very hard now to, make the case that I'm going to be paying $300 a month for a platform, especially when you know that you can utilize things like ChatGPT really well. And so I would say definitely, um, I don't think in the coming 10 years we're going to see a replacement. But we definitely see a lot of the disruptions happening in the conventional SaaS platform, and the way it's been developed and the way it's used, over the next year, 2 years easily. Um, and I would just end in saying as well that m- one thing that I found very interesting, and we do it ourselves, is you can actually build platforms very quickly now with AI, right? But then when you build the platform, you're still building a SaaS product if you want to sell it to end users. And the only difference I would say is at that point is, um, how do they interface with the platform? So a big one for me is I still haven't seen a revolution on the interface with things like multi-agent systems, which what we focus on. How do we actually allow users to first see what our agent's doing? How does that interface look like? And then how do we interact with them? And so the only popular version that we have is ChatGPT, OpenAI. And it's one of the reasons why I would say they took a big piece of the market. And they were the first one to develop the models, but they were the first one to know how to actually build an interface that was conducive for the everyday user.
So that's actually a different answer from what I was expecting, but that makes it pretty clear. You don't need to replace your existing tools, SaaS models. You just need to build an AI model that actually integrates all your tasks. Um, and about ChatGPT, I just have a confusion. I mean, I understand that there are a lot of things that ChatGPT can do for you. But say if I can ask a few, some questions from ChatGPT. I mean, you can, if you want, you can answer my question, or if you don't want to answer, that's completely fine. So ChatGPT can do a lot of things, can answer my questions generally. But say if I want ChatGPT to check my calendar, maybe, or schedule a meeting or something like that. So that's not actually, that's not something that it can do right now. Do you think that they're going to come up with any such solution that it has more capabilities than what it is doing right now?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Absolutely. Just look at the recent development of the NCP, right? The Model Context Protocol done by Anthropic. And this has made it a lot more accessible for a lot of people to be able to integrate very, very interesting, or very, very useful tools into your agents now. Um, and you're finding people develop servers on MCP that are very interesting, kind of like what you're suggesting now about being able to maybe, book me an appointment, or book a ticket, or show me the calendar, etc. This has already been developed, and it's being developing. So definitely, I would say ChatGPT and OpenAI will be working towards those specific things. But I think what's more interesting would be how does other companies, um, take a piece of the pie or enter the market? And I think it's going to be where every single company is going to be focused on very specific niche problems, right? Because in the end of the day, um, what happens is a lot of companies exist, and they have, available to them a large amount of data, uh, large customer bases, and existing business. And the way they will utilize that is by narrowing down on one thing that differentiates them from all the others, even like the likes of OpenAI, which is your data. If you have specific, clean, and very high quality data, then you have a unique selling point. That is that's your kind of advantage, right? And so that's where you compete. So I would definitely think, yes, OpenAI will be allowing that type of, capabilities in the near future. But I also think that it's going to be ubiquitous and many companies will be doing that. But then the question is, what are they focusing on?
Thank you for your detailed answer. My next question is, Adam, we've come to know that you are a huge football fan. I'd like to understand from you how AI is transforming, sports industry. How has it impacted so far?
Great question. Uh, well, we can highlight. I mean, I think the first step for me is to think about what does okay. So a industry like football, what does it actually offer? Right? You have you have two sides to this. You got the customer side, which is the fans, and then you've got the football teams, right? And you've got the big the big teams that are funding, millions and millions for, creating the next Cristiano Ronaldo, right? And then in the middle, you have big investors and investors that want to see ROI, right? And that want to see return on their investment. Now, because of AI, obviously we're shortening the time expectation of when to we actually get rewarded for the investments we're doing. So in the past, we had teams like Alex Ferguson under Man United management, that done an amazing job, the best in history, with the amount of trophies they've actually won, with the actual records they broke, and then the managerial, I mean, leadership from Alex Ferguson was unparalleled. And so, but that took a significant amount of years. You're talking about 10, 15, 20 years. But I think now people are expecting a lot quicker results. So how does that play out? Well, in comes data, right? We have data from all our players. We have data on the pitch. You have data about your customers. And now you're using that data to drive decisions. So a few of the things, let's start with what exists already, is the VAR, right? The video assistant referee technology. Now that's interesting because on the one hand, it's kind of it's made football fairer, but on another hand, it's kind of taken away a bit of the old taste of football, the flow of, there's a spontaneity to football and a struggle that we used to love seeing play out, even if some things were unfair. There was something human about letting it go and trying to make a decision at the current time as things happen. And so that broke that changed the way football was being played. And but on the other hand, that gave a lot of executives now power to take data on people like the football players and data on referees. So now instead of it being this holistic human experience, people are now doing data analysis on whether or not this player done well or didn't do well, right? So it's changing a lot of that type of structure. A few other things would be, of course, is the team dynamic. So inside now they're creating these kind of data analytics on how you should, you know, how on the next game you should actually do your formation, um, and you're trying to play out all of this kind of strategic statistical analysis on the game, which which obviously in the past has been done, right? I mean, you know that very famous data science example with the baseball in America in the 2000, I think, for Oakland Athletics under the manager. I forgot his name now. Something Bean or Bien or something. I forgot his name, but it was basically a manager that was known to take a team from the baseball league, and he had a data analyst that was very known at the time to be against the typical kind of decision on how do we actually buy players. And they had at that point the lowest budget in history, and they didn't have money by players, and the only thing they could rely on was their data statistics on players. And so they used something called, I think, on base percentage, right? And they use that statistics to be able to buy kind of cheaper players, but that people didn't know about, but we could see their skills because we had these lovely revealing statistics. And so over the course of the year, they won the league. They outcompeted like massive companies like New York Yankees that had 4 or 5 times their budget. And they done and obviously made history, and that was through data. And so now we are starting to see it play out even more in places like football. But I think it's going to change the game a bit, and it's a bit strange. Another thing I would say is the proactive maintenance of teams. So they'll start to discover and make analytics on injury prone players, and how you can foresee it and how you can proactively take action to ensure that your players are healthy and they're not susceptible to kind of injury in the future. And then the last thing I would say, maybe, which is important, is on the other side of the spectrum, which is the customers. What does this look like for me as a fan, as a Man United fan? Well, one thing is you get hyper personalized experience rather than the generalized experience you get from websites and some of the videos that you see on the kind of fan channels. Now you can get hyper personalized experiences, and so you can now deliver exactly what each individual and each fan wants according to their preferences, according to their data that they're receiving from them. And so it does change the game a lot. And those are the few things I think that you're going to see AI creep in and start to take advantage of.
To add what you've said, in cricket, we have these tools that help, decide on whether it is better, depending on the weather conditions and the condition of the pitch, it is better to bat first or bowl first. And there, I mean, it's also there are other tools. I mean, there that are helping in maybe making decisions on who to include in the team or not. Um, so let's come to financial institutions, financial services. I mean, there's a rise of fintechs and challenger banks. How do you see financial landscape changing with AI implementation?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely one of the biggest industries that's getting disrupted at the moment, isn't it? Because, well, it's quite obvious. It seems to lend itself really well for data-driven models, right? There's a lot of data. Most things are standardized or are backed by some sort of policy. So everything is basically um, just, well, rules of engagement for every financial industry, including things like trading. And so those are perfect situations where you can do models and AI models to be able to do predictive analysis, forecasting, account management, regulation, and obviously policy compliance. And so all of these is great. One way I would see it affecting is, first of all, I would say it's going to allow a lot more players to enter. Um, so that's an important point. The reason why is, in the past, financial institutions were very there was a very small pool of competition for them, right? You need high levels of expertise, ridiculous resources, maybe good network. It was very difficult to start one. And so now just a small innovation is really changing things. And I think the impact is within the details of the process of finance. So when an account manager has to go through thousands and thousands of documents, right? Um, our problem here is the details, which is he has to actually manually do that. And then now you have AI that can easily, you know, just consolidate all of those documents and provide you with the type of knowledge that you need, right? So in the one hand, what it's doing is it will reduce some of the work needed by current employees. But another way of seeing it is it's going to expand other possibilities in finance. And the fintech industry, for example, you can focus on other things like cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, which is really reconfiguring the idea of what finance is. right? So I don't know if you've ever come across of obviously, so blockchain, one of the things that's is happening is they're starting to think about how do you talk about new businesses? How do you talk about investment in business? And one of the ways they're thinking about it is rather than building a business and then asking for investment, instead, what you're doing is you'll be building businesses where investment are directly allocated instantly. And you do that, yeah. And so it's a completely different model. And that's been enabled by technologies like the blockchain, NFTs, and all the likes of Web3 technologies. And so there's a real difference in even how to think about investing. So that's going to be a big one. Credit and credit and lending would be another part of the finance that's is significantly being shifted. Um, I think credit and lending will be a lot more data driven, of course. I mean, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. It makes a lot of sense. Um, but I think this will also affect in the future. I think credit and the credit based lending will also be globalized, meaning I think at some point many countries will have a unified credit system, right? Instead of going to every country having different policies and different ways of crediting people. I think what we're going to start to see, because we're able to take in more data, we have a lot more available access to a unified data set through obviously the connectivity that we see in the economy. So, well, currently, if I have a credit score in England, that doesn't affect me in America. And in America, it doesn't affect me in Canada. So imagine a world now when we're very connected, we have speed, computational power, and a lot of data. All of a sudden, there seems to be a shift towards, you know, a unified credit scoring system. And I think this will become more and more the reality in the coming years. And then obviously the last thing I would say is obviously you can think about financial strategy. The financial strategy is completely going to be different. We have advanced forecasting, and now we have dynamic scenario kind of simulations. And all of this will be affecting the industry by and large massively. And I think it's going to be as significant. So, the last thing I would say is think about AI trading in the 90s. One of the most important things of that time was people spent millions and billions of pounds to wire up fiber optic cables so that they can get a fraction of a second faster in trading. So, because every second counted for billions of dollars. And so, what mattered was the speed of information, right? But now we have the information and a large amount of data, and everyone has access to it. What becomes the challenge here is the speed in decision making, right? We need we have cognitive intelligence kind of infused in the models. We have access to all of this other information, and now we need that kind of quick decision making models that will be provided to us via obviously the implementation of AI and AI models.
Now that's very interesting. Where you've mentioned that there's a possibility of a centralized credit mechanism, credit scoring mechanism for financial institutions. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, generally it is there in the countries. Countries have their own centralized credit mechanism. But globally, I think that's a possibility. Other than, I mean, there could be considerations like legal considerations in terms of countries' laws. That's pretty interesting. So my next question would be, Adam, other than the financial costs, what do you think companies should be considering, as in leadership should of a company should consider in terms of hidden consequences or hidden impacts of AI if you don't have a proper strategy?
Okay, so this is very important. I mean, this is something that we can talk to more closely as a company and as a personal experience of my own. There are many things I think needs to be considered here that is not financially related. I think one thing would be many companies are unadaptable to change. I mean, they can't adapt to change. And the reason why is because they don't have an AI strategy. It's very difficult. So what you get is this kind of dispersed uptake of individuals in a company utilizing specific tools. This person's using ChatGPT, this person's using V0, this person using Anthropic for code. It's like that. It's like it's very separated, and it's not kind of unified into a company's strategy, and they don't have any kind of full rollout on how should we approach AI, how should we use it, where do we benefit from it. So that's the first thing, is that if you want to adapt to change and you want to have this kind of overarching AI implementation and AI driven solutions in your company, you would have to have a strategy for that. Um, Also, I would say so infrastructure, very very rigid infrastructure. So many of so in the past we always created software in a kind of monolithic architecture, right? And then as we started to go to the cloud, we started to realize that that wasn't sufficient. There was a lot of problems there. And so what did we create? We created microservices approach, right? We broke down the different components of an architecture and we allowed it to be, changeable and malleable. And now with the kind of AI coming into place, those same principles still stand. However, what is required for an AI infrastructure is different, right? Your testing is different. So you get static testing in software development. In AI, you get obviously dynamic testing, and they're very different on the way that you implement them. So they're very difficult to implement. Now, that's one stage actually most companies fail in. Before going into implementation, you would have to test a lot of your models. You have to test a lot of your different scenarios. You have to find the outliers of your problem. And this is something that we're working on, even with a current company, an upcoming company called Raga.ai. And they have, for example, a platform that allows you to do observation and testing and performance monitoring. And that's one aspect, a biggest aspect that most companies don't implement because they don't have that pipeline. So strategy allows you to plan for all of that. And you would need that. Otherwise, you will get this kind of outdated infrastructure, and it requires a lot of change, a lot of money in the future if you wanted to adapt. But I would say, lastly, one thing is, let's maybe move away from the software side of stuff and focus on now the human element. So you erode trust. If you do not have an AI strategy that is helped through an AI audit, that's something that we always tell customers, even if they want an implementation from the get-go and they spend a lot of this money, we always say to them, before committing money, before committing time, start with the AI audit, understand what your company needs, because we can understand even your culture. Can we help employees come up to the same level as your executives and as a CEO to know where are we going, why are we using AI, where does it benefit us? And then you can answer a lot of the concerns that most of us have. Is it going to replace me? Am I going to be made redundant? Are we wasting time using the wrong tools? All of these type of questions is running through everyone. And so the erosion of trust is a big factor when it comes to not having an AI strategy, or understanding your kind of situation in terms of infrastructure for AI.
That's a very important point that you've mentioned. The leadership needs to work on their culture first. And I'll mention one thing that I've just read. World Economic Forum in their 2025 survey has mentioned that 63% of the companies globally are concerned that believe that the biggest barrier in transformation is skills gap. So they need to actually take the build trust with their staff, their employees, that it's not going to replace them, and train them, make them learn the new ways of doing the tasks that they were previously doing. One more question that I have: what do you think is one misconception while planning or implementing a strategy that the companies need to address?
So one very common one is the way to implement AI and the way to think of it is not a technology problem, but a people's problem. a culture problem. Um, a lot of people are running after a lot of AI tools because it sounds great. A lot of people think if I throw money at data scientists and I spend a lot of money on infrastructure, then that solves all my problems. And that can't be further from the truth. Do not compare and do not analyze. And I think this is a big problem. We take these great, lovely outliers, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, you just name the list. These are all of these mammoths of a company with very peculiar structures. And you think by breaking them down, you will understand how to implement AI. Okay, they done it this way, we can do it this way. No, no, chat OpenAI can get rid of their top employee or the rid of the CEO and change them to another CEO and still have the company function, right? And it's because a few things. One, it's actually native to AI. It's an AI native company. The entire culture and structure that matters on how to build AI and how to do AI solutions is already embedded into the culture, is already embedded into the processes and the systems. So when you look at now the majority of businesses, which is not native to AI, which existed before the power of AI and the power of generative AI, then you have to think in a very different way. And it's not just by changing the head or changing a few employees, but it's by incorporating an entire process and strategy from the ground up or the top down, depending on how you would like to see it, where you can actually start to get people to the same level um, for implementation of AI. So the biggest misconception is AI is a technology to implement, as opposed to AI is a cultural um, uh, implementation and struggle, and it's not a technological struggle.
What will you say to people who who feel threatened and feel that the jobs are going to be taken away? They're going to be replaced by AI.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this has been said often by a lot of people, and by known figures in the field. Um, I mean, the best way. Remember, we started talking about the Industrial Revolution one, two, and three, and four, right? And we went through the timeline, and we tried to understand how that changed workflows. When you when you look at each industrial revolution, you always get the problem of short term redundancies and the evaporation of particular work process and job roles. But what we need to understand is that at each stage, new industries are massively open, right? And that means that we have a higher, we have more opportunities, and more people are able to do different things and actually be a part of the economy. Now, if you think about when we were working in factories and assembly lines in the second industrial revolution, no one would have thought that once we start to digitalize and actually build semiconductors and build the entire wave of kind of computer-led economy, where we start to go into the knowledge worker economy and information age, you never thought that the software industry would have emerged the way it did with its thousands and hundreds of different job roles, the IT sector, right? And then all the other kind of disruptions that happened from it, telecommunication, and on we can actually go. Like you can see that every industry was opened up, and many of the kind of job roles were developed, and they emerge out of these new kind of industries. So one thing I would say is definitely take a look at our timeline, take a look at our historical facts of what happened in each age when the industrial revolution kicks in and how that worked. But then secondly, on a more personal note, think about how much AI enhances your capabilities, right? So like, you've heard this before said a lot, and it's becoming a bit more of a cliche, but it's true. I mean, the future will be uh, AI, or workers that use AI will replace workers that don't use AI. And I think that's a lot more, a lot more aligned to the reality, right? And I think, generally speaking, any one of us have access to AI um, and AI models, and you can benefit from it. So I would say, you don't need to worry about it, but you do need to start to acquire one important skill that I think this entire generation will start to have to get used to, which is you need to learn how to you need to learn quickly, and you need to learn how to do that. Um, Learning quickly, adopting tools, understanding obviously your job role and how that could change will benefit you in finding your own niche and being able to deliver your services in whatever way you would like. So I don't think there should be a massive fear. I think there is a short-term repercussions that many people will start to face. Definitely, you'll get some people will be made redundant from it. However, if you have a positive attitude and adopt AI into your personal life and learn how to use it to better upskill yourself for the economy, you would find many different opportunities that you once didn't have is now accessible to you.
Yeah, that's right. Rather than feeling threatened or stalling, implementation, you should rather upskill yourself so that you are open to there are more opportunities for you. So thank you very much, Adam, for your time today. It was really insightful listening to you. I mean, you have the expertise and the experience, and then you've actually explained everything in pretty much detail. Last few words that you'd like to end your our conversation with.
Remember, when we are any company or any individuals is trying to take AI seriously, always start with a strategy and start to understand what your company has and needs to be able to develop AI. Now, take a look. You're more than welcome to take a look at our website. We're sensei/consulting.com. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. My name is Adam Elshimi. So if you just find me on LinkedIn, you can get a whole series of different articles and different demos and different examples of why it would benefit you to look at AI audits and why you should take that route instead of wasting a lot of money and time into obviously implementations or AI solutions that would never see a day or light. So ultimately, start small, have a strategy, and keep developing. I think the future opportunities are infinite, and I can't wait to see what everyone is actually going to be creating and making in the future. So thank you so much, Sana, for having me today, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you for your time, Adam.